Let me be unequivocal. No DNC officer should ever attempt to influence the outcome of a primary election, whether on behalf of an incumbent or a challenger. If you want to challenge incumbents, you're more than free to do that, but just not as an officer of the DNC, because our job is to be neutral arbiters. We can't be both the referee and also the player at the same time.
And again, I don't think you intended this, but you essentially destroyed any chance I have to show the leadership that I need to. So it's really frustrating. Jane.
We said it a lot at the time, but just in case you thought we were being hyperbolic, I think you are currently witnessing the living proof that 2024 was not just another normal election. No, as Trump often referred to it as the final battle, right? Truly, we were dealing with something so important and frankly, so cataclysmic in the sense that, this was game 7, right? This was ultimately going to be the end of the trilogy. And not only would the winner feel the ultimate ecstasy that, I still think of to this day from November 5th, but even more importantly here, perhaps the loser would take a long time to recover. Again, this is not a normal political cycle you are witnessing, and that is currently the case, as even now, guys, it is June 2025. We are now more than 8 months, almost like basically nearing now an entire year since the election. The Democrat Party still fails to recover in any way, shape, or form, right? Normally you see, by the way, it is a normal pattern that, hey, after an election, when you lose, it kind of sucks for a little bit. There's a little bit of disheartening, whatever, but usually the party recovers. As a matter of fact, oftentimes opposition parties are able to use the fact that they are in the minority as sort of a rallying call to go and fight, right? Whether that's actually the Democrats when Trump won in 2016 or the Tea Party back in Obama, Republicans, I guess you could say, under the Biden administration. But something is noticeably absent this time around, which is this noticeable and tangible sense that the Democrat Party is basically broken. It is directionalist. It is constantly trying to mount some type of opposition, but without any clear leadership, with a severe financial crisis after just a total destruction of trust, right? We're dealing with something here, guys, that is way much bigger than the normal fact of the matter. And I have to say at this point, I'm not going to go out and say that, Democrats will never win again, but I do truly think that when Democrats eventually regain power, it will not be in this current form of their party, right? I think truly you are going to have to witness something insane happening here. But with that said, guys, today I want to give you an update on the situation over at the DNC. And this has been something we've been covering for a long time now, all the way back to David Hogg's initial election, where the party could not figure out how the gender rules were supposed to work or the diversity quotas or anything like that. Then, of course, we had David Hogg threatening to primary out Democrat incumbents because he, whatever his flaws, and by the way, not a big fan of his, but, he did kind of be onto something in the sense that, hey, the party has to change. The establishment did not want the change. Of course, just a couple weeks ago, we covered how formally now David Hogg is out at the DNC. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, after his election essentially got voided and that whole story, apparently the ousted Vice Chair David Hogg will now say he will not seek a second chance at his now former seat. So he's not even going to be trying to come back to the DNC. He's officially given up on that post. He's been pushed out. But ladies and gentlemen, if Ken Martin, the main chair of the DNC, or any of these characters thought that David Hogg was the source of their problems, right? He was just the scapegoat that we can blame for everything. And then once he is gone, once that agitator, that provoker is out of the party, everything will be fine. That is clearly not the case because, ladies and gentlemen, just this week, a new article, a report here out of the New York Times has released detailing the ways in which, as you can see right here, the DNC is in chaos and desperate for cash. Okay, so again, guys, so all this talk about David Hogg, James Carville was melting down saying David Hogg's destroying the Democrat Party. It turns out, ladies and gentlemen, in his honest defense, and I'm not here to defend much about Hogg, but he was not the source of the problem. The source of the problem was frankly systemic. And by the way, this new guy, Ken Martin, who is elected to the DNC to essentially be the guy who's supposed to steer them correctly, right? He was seen as a competent figure who ran a very good state party in Minnesota, and truly he knows what he's doing. Apparently that is not the case because, as you can see, under its new leader, Ken Martin, the DNC has been plagued by infighting and a drop in big donations. Essentially, the donors here have been pulling out. And privately, by the way, guys, According to a new report that came out just this week out of Politico as well, apparently critics within the DNC are savaging his tenure, calling him, quote, weak, whiny, and invisible. So, needless to say, it looks like there may be a leadership coup happening at the very top now of the DNC very soon. It is a party in total chaos. And when you look at the preview for the 2026 midterms, this is an election that Democrats are not only assuming they're going to win, but they frankly freaking need to win, right? They need to actually put up something of significance after the defeat of 2024. But I do have to say, genuinely, okay, whatever the vulnerabilities are of the Republicans, and I think there are many, I'm not by no means calling them a perfect political entity, you do have to make the sincere and genuine observation here that if you have a Democrat Party that cannot organize, that cannot get out of its own way in terms of a leadership perspective, it has no money, which, money definitely is not all that wins elections, but especially in a midterm and off year, it is something that matters a little bit more, in terms of exposure to low name recognition candidates and all that. This is a serious problem. So as I said here, it would appear the problem at the DNC is not getting better. We're not moving on from 2024. Oh, a little bit of disarray. Everything's right now. Nope, it's only getting worse. We'll tell you about it in today's video. So folks, do us a big favor here. If you enjoy the content, I know, as always, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Subscribing is not only the best way to support our work, but it also ensures that you stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And with that said, so let us start here with the report out of the New York Times that apparently the DNC is basically going broke, as you can see. So apparently just months into the tenure of a new party leader, Ken Martin, who I once again reiterate, right? This guy is Tim Walz's best friend. The Minnesota Democrat Party is usually seen as a pretty solid one, considering, right, Minnesota has not gone red at the presidential level since Richard Nixon in 1972. But, apparently, right, Ken Martin, the DNC's financial situation has grown so bleak that top officials have discussed whether they might need to borrow money this year, right? Take out an emergency loan to keep paying the bills. Ladies and gentlemen, I remind you, even on this front, at the Kamala campaign already, right? The DNC already was having a financial issue after Kamala's $1.5 billion campaign somehow ended $20 million in debt. But you might think to yourself, okay, surely they'll pay that off because of the, Trump derangement syndrome after all, right? And there's no shortage of that, certainly, that you're seeing in the streets, but there is apparently such a lack of institutional trust for the Democrat Party that even Trump derangement syndrome, even the anger over Project 2025 and National Guard and deportations, none of it is translating into actual money and organization by the Democrat Party itself. So, you can be angry all you want, but if you can't organize a political operation, then this is what happens, right? But apparently fundraising from major donors, some of whom Mr. Martin has still not spoken with, very interesting, has slowed sharply. At the same time, he has expanded the party's financial commitments to every state and even to far-flung territories like Guam. That is right, ladies and gentlemen. Apparently, this guy's, by the way, supposed to be competent, is spending more Democrat Party money in Guam while the party itself is basically in debt and on the verge of bankruptcy. And they're like, oh, let's go to Guam, right? So, a lot of people have made the comparisons to the USAID situation. Some have even made the joke that, hey, ever since USAID stopped giving out money, the Democrat Party is suddenly broke. I mean, some people have been saying that. But even then, right, it really does summarize, frankly, going back to the Doge debate a couple of months ago, what we're dealing with from the Democrat Party, right? What a big surprise, right? This is how they run their party. How do you think they wanted to run their government? That's what it's really all about here. But as you can see, so fellow Democrats are grumbling that Mr. Martin, who quietly accepted a raise after taking the post, ladies and gentlemen, let's not forget, okay, Ken Martin was supposed to be seen as a guy who would be good at the job, right? He was grassroots, etc. He came from the more, less like coastal establishment wing of the party, right? It was between him, Rahm Emmanuel, also put his hat in the ring, and, people said he's too corrupt. He doesn't really have the party's best interests in mind. So they're like, okay, this guy's not corrupt. Well, there you go, ladies and gentlemen, right? Again, Tim Walz's BFF, by the way, that sort of wing of the party, the Midwestern I don't know, old boomer geriatric, like freaking, I don't, that type of ilk we're talking about here, the type of people who go to Tim Walz rallies, they have now been handed institutional control of the party, and a newsflash is not going any better, okay? Because really, when you put the fake Canadian accent aside, Tim Walz and, I don't know, the Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsoms of the world are really not all that different, Nonetheless, so far they say, he has been unable to help unite his party against Republicans who control the federal government. And by the way, you would think, especially in a normal election year, that it shouldn't be all, honestly, it's very easy to unite when you're the opposition because you have a common enemy. When you're actually the party who's in charge, it's much harder to keep your party united. Frankly, I think that's something you constantly see here. But that is not the case. That is not the case. Why? Because again, 2024 was not a normal election. It was a year that broke the Democrat Party, and this is what you're dealing with, a broken Democrat Party. Nonetheless, a protracted and public fight with David Hogg, the 25-year-old activist turned DNC vice chair, who blindsided party officials with a plan to challenge incumbent Democrats, made things worse. That is certainly true, right? The clash included the leak of embarrassing audio of Mr. Martin questioning his own role and ended in Mr. Hogg's unceremonious exit this month. By the way, we did play this before, but, for those of you who didn't see the video, you want a refresher, or basically, honestly, I think it really does summarize. It's a good example of the current state of the Democrat Party. Guys, this video came out just earlier this month of DNC chair, the main chair here, Ken Martin, literally breaking down in tears on camera, saying he doesn't really want to do this job anymore because apparently David Hogg and others have screwed up the whole thing so bad. And they're needless to say, here you have the current state, yes, of the Democrat Party.
And I'll say, look, it has plenty of warts, and we're all trying to change those for sure. But the longer we continue this fight, the harder it is for us to actually do what we all want to do, which is make a difference in this country again. So I deeply respect you, David. I too was looking forward to working with you, but this has created a situation, and I'll be very honest with you, for the first time in my 100 days on this job, and Jessica knows this, the other night I said to myself for the first time, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And partly not because of the stress and all the naysayers, right? I'm used to that. I've spent 14 years as a chair. I'm used to getting beat up on. But, this is really everything, from this election, this credentials report, and how Malcolm's been treated in this, to, the fact the election itself, how Shasti and Gina were treated in this. I'm just quite frustrated to be in this position, because what you've done, whether you like it or not, or know it or not, David, is no one knows who the hell I am, right? I'm trying to get my sea legs underneath of me and actually develop any amount of credibility so I can go out there and raise the money and do the job I need to put ourselves in a position to win. And again, I don't think you intended this, but you essentially destroyed any chance I have to show the leadership that I need to. So it's really frustrating. Jane.
Great leader you guys have. Clearly he has his head on his shoulders. He has a vision. He has a plan. He's confident. I mean, just utterly unbelievable. But, here's the thing, right? So David Hogg's now gone. Is the DNC any better? No, things are just getting worse, okay? Frankly, even Ken Martin, this guy who is, you're seeing right now, probably overrated, not as competent as he was hyped up to be. Nonetheless, I still would not go out there and blanketly say he is the issue either. You can replace him with whatever DNC chair you want. Is it going to make these donors still want to show up? I'm not exactly sure about that, because is there a party around the DNC, talking about the actual politicians themselves, the messaging that is actually worth fighting for or convincing, or, in any ways, I guess just good? Number one there. And even furthermore, when you consider things like the Act Blue situation, it's like, okay, now that the Democrat Party's fundraising machine is under increased legal scrutiny, because people realize, hey, there's probably massive credit card fraud, for instance, going on here, are the dollars even there is what I will say. Some interesting questions, frankly, a lot of people have to be asking here. But nonetheless, that was soon followed, as you can see here by the news, that two of the country's most influential labor leaders, talking about union people here, by the way, Democrat Party, historically a union working class party, right, who represent a combined 3.2 million workers, were also leaving the DNC. Okay, so the realignment here you're seeing, guys, with the working class and the union workers, etc., them leaving the Democrat Party. It was not just a brief 2024 moment in time. No, instead it is a long-term trend you're clearly seeing happening. And even the fact, union leaders are usually the most stubborn ones. Usually it's the union workers who were voting Trump all this time. The union leaders are the ones, totally on the side of, Democrats, this and that, because there's basically a political corruption deal there going on. They're basically political activists. Even them, guys, leaving the DNC, both apparently questioned the party's direction under Mr. Martin. Keep in mind here, Ken Martin, guys, is supposed to be the Midwestern sort of Rust Belt, I guess you could say blue wall, whatever, maybe we'll say blue wall representation of the Democrat Party. That's what's happening here, right? Utterly screwed, as you can see. Rufus Gifford, who served as the party's finance chairman of the Kamala Harris 2024 campaign, this guy maintains relationships with many top Democrat donors, suggested that Democrats were being sent the wrong message at a time when they are desperately, quote, looking for fight and leadership. So this is something you so often see. Okay, we need to fight harder. Well, I think you see people trying to fight. Every politician is desperately trying to make themselves look like the craziest, most deranged individual. I'm not sure that's necessarily accurate. It's also a question of what are you fighting for? I think that's important. But leadership, I do have to say, I certainly agree. Okay, there is no leadership in the Democrat Party for sure. I mean, that's pretty indisputable. But we go on here, quote, what they're seeing is headline after headline of incompetence and infighting. And I think that is a real problem, not just for the DNC, but for the larger Democratic brand. Well, hey, when your very leadership election that brought in David Hogg and Ken Martin to begin with was a confusing mess of gender pronouns and all this stuff where they couldn't even figure out how their own rules were supposed to work, yeah, I don't think that should be all that surprising that there's a headline of incompetence, for sure. We need to come together and focus on the issues at hand. That's what's got to happen now. And I mean today. And if that can't happen, we need to shift course. So as you can see, right, people clearly casting doubts on Ken Martin as the leader of the DNC. By the way, I think that happens. I would be frankly very surprised if Ken Martin survives the year of 2025 still as the main chair of the Democrat Party. But again, as I'll say here, right, I'm not sure if you replace him, it's going to happen any better. Because then you're going into the 2026 midterms, and it's like, okay, so Ken Martin was trying to rebuild the party infrastructure. He basically did not succeed very much at all, so he inherited a mess. He's going to inherit the successor a mess, but the successor is probably going to have to start over, and they have what? A couple of months basically in 2026 to get their act together. I'm not exactly sure that's going to go over so well, I mean, you could say, I guess, and you look at the RNC in 2024 with Michael Whatley, that did happen sort of towards the end, but still, right? We're dealing with a way different situation here, frankly. But anyways, there's David Hogg. What a guy he is. Part of the bumpy beginning appears to be fallout from a bare-knuckled fight for the chairmanship, with the spoils going to the winner as usual. Mr. Martin has pushed to install allies in some key posts and remove supporters of his vanquished rivals. So as you can see, I don't understand what the difference is between any of these Democrats, frankly. But, so apparently a lot of the people, frankly, like I said, so Ken Martin, like I said, represents that sort of Midwestern, like Tim Walz style Democrat, whatever, right? I think what you're seeing is a lot of the Obama coastal elite sort of brand of the Democrats, which again, when you really peel back the curtain, they're not that different of people, but that faction, I guess you could say, of the party, the, historic, basically the Kamala 2024 people, the Biden people, it would seem to me they are not so happy because, quote, some of the changes will leave people feeling as if they don't have a seat at the table, said Donna Brazile, a former party chairwoman who, did some shady things in 2016, you might remember. But he has his own inner circle. I'm not in it. I don't want to be in it. It has not been lost on some Democrats that Mr. Martin arrived at the DNC as a consummate insider a man who led both the state party in Minnesota and the Association of State Party Chairs. So this guy, like I said, was supposed to be the Michael Whatley. He's supposed to be a competent individual, yet he has struggled to navigate some internal Democratic coalition politics. But again, guys, I have to say, in total fairness to this person, I mean, frankly, who could? How do you even, if you're the best leader on the earth, manage this absolute clown car of idiots that is known as the Democrat Party? Nonetheless, so you basically get the idea. Okay, so there's infighting, all this stuff. But here we go into the party low on money, right? The biggest challenge facing Mr. Martin right now may be financial. Oh, there you go. Their precious Democrat dollars. Okay. 6 people briefed on the party's fundraising, who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss the finances, said that the big donors, who are an essential part of the party's funding, had been very slow to give to the party this year as Mr. Martin solicits contributions. His commitment to state parties, which amounts to $1 million in monthly spending, has further strained the finances. So he's trying to spend money, I guess, to rebuild the infrastructure. No one wants to donate, though. And again, when you're talking about a party where that's kind of their MO, right? Everything needs to be paid for, bought for, astroturfed, all this stuff. Well, now they don't even have the money to astroturf things. I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Because they've faced such a severe crisis of trust. You can't come off as a Democrat in 2025 as some type of sincere populist or person of the people or whatever. You know, maybe 2016, but guess what? There's a guy who did that. His name was Bernie on the left-wing side. And, the Democrats pushed him out. Who do they have now, right? I don't know. You're going to run AOC in 2028? I mean, literally, that's your best shot at a so-called grassroots candidate. And I don't know. I wouldn't be too optimistic about that either, right? But nonetheless, senior DNC officials have discussed the possibility of borrowing money in the coming months to keep the operations fully funded, according to 2 people with direct knowledge of these private discussions. Mr. Martin has acknowledged these conversations. That's certainly not our plan right now, he said, of tapping into a emergency line of credit, adding that, quote, "I don't know if we'll have to at this point." He noted that grassroots fundraising has remained strong, and the party said small donations in his first 3 months were the most under a new chairman. Well, okay. I mean, you can cherry pick the statistics, but newsflash, if you're so out of money that you're taking out an emergency loan, by the way, before 2026, the main elections, I'll say, are next year, not this year. You're in that kind of situation, an utter mess, guys. But still, as you'll see here, the party's total cash reserves shrank by $4 million from January through April, according to the recent federal records, while the RNC's coffers swelled up by roughly $29 million. So basically, Republicans are in a surplus. Their cash money is growing. The Democrats are shrinking. That has to be concerning, frankly. I don't know. Maybe check David Hogg's pockets. I think he might have just ran away with all of it. Like a leprechaun with the pot of gold, right? Hey, where did he take the treasure? But anyways, the party out of power often falls behind the one holding the White House, but still the current financial gap is large. $18 million on hand for the DNC entering May, compared to $67 million for the RNC. That is huge. Again, the Democrats are usually the people, especially in the era of Trump, who have way more money than us. The situation is changing. Hefty chunks sit in special accounts that cannot be used for operational costs. So, talking probably about their rainy day fund there, right? In the first 4 months of the year, only 3 people gave $100,000 or more to the DNC. According to the FEC reports, the party said it had received 3 more 6-figure donations in May and June from individuals. Almost no one questions Mr. Martin's work ethic, but basically, right, they're basically saying here that he just does not have the it factor. Because as you can see, they recently apparently did a New York event with Kamala Harris that did not bring in as much money as some people had hoped. Oh, gee, big surprise, right? It only raised roughly $300,000. This sum was a fraction of the $1 million price for a single top-end ticket to a New York fundraiser just last fall. Even as the party faces a financial crunch, the DNC increased Mr. Martin's salary this year, federal records show, and the party confirmed his annual salary is now $350,000, which is up from $300,000. So literally, He's not doing a good job. He's failing as chair. And they're like, here's a $50,000 pay raise. I think it's honestly very emblematic of how they run the wider government itself. Now, with that in mind, okay, the situation clearly, as I said, I'd be very surprised here if Ken Martin survives the year 2025, because according to a recent report by Politico, and this usually takes place because literally insiders in the party want to talk to the press to basically put it out there, 4.5 months after DNC chair Ken Martin was elected and all that, his short tenure has been engulfed by bitter infighting. Even long-term party insiders are getting impatient. Interviews with a dozen DNC members revealed deep frustration with Martin and concern about his ability to unify and lead a party trying to recover from the massive loss, yes, of 2024. One DNC member, who others like in this story, described him as looking, quote, weak and whiny. Okay. I mean, yeah, he literally is on camera, by the way, on tape, being weak and whiny with David Hogg. Oh, you're not doing my job. You're hurting my job. It's like David Hogg, some like 20-year-old kid who they gave a leadership position for no reason. So yeah, that's correct. And another said he had been invisible and his early tenure has been disappointing. Gee, you don't say. Now, his rival here, this is another guy who wanted to be the DNC chair, Rahm Emmanuel, the former Barack Obama chief of staff, said the committee is floundering. Now, take that with a grain of salt, because Rahm Emmanuel is kind of, bitter. He's scorned for his own reasons, but still, maybe he's making a serious point here. We're in the most existential crisis with Donald Trump, both at home and abroad, and with the biggest political opportunity in a decade, said Emmanuel, and the DNC has spent 6 months on a firing squad in the circle and can't even fire a shot out, and Trump's world is a target-rich environment. Well, very interesting choice of rhetoric there, given recent events over the past year or so. But okay, point taken. I mean, yes, there are definitely political vulnerabilities that Democrats could exploit if they were competent, but they're not. Right? Instead, they managed to somehow pick all the fights over the 60-40 issues and the 80-20 issues where they're the minority. Deportations and the border, by the way, being one of them that I've recently pointed out, but it is far from the only one. Nonetheless, many DNC members and outside Democrats, including Martin supporters, said they wish the party would just move on from recent internal turmoil instead, focus on mounting an effective fight against Donald Trump. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? That is simply not going to happen. And I once again hear guys say, as Ken Martin goes on and says, I ran and won the race for DNC chair to try to get the DNC out of DC because too many people in DC want to point the fingers. If Ken Martin was supposed to be a non-DC, non-coastal elite outsider, right, he's not running the party much better. As I said, you're really dealing with multiple sides here of the same coin. And frankly, in my opinion, it doesn't matter who you put in charge. It can be Ken Martin, it can be Rahm Emmanuel, it can be David Hogg, or the Native American woman who was supposed to replace him, or whatever. At the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, I think the simple situation you see is this. If the party is not going to stand for something that is worth fighting for, convincing to the people, if the politicians are going to continue to be lame, the party is still going to keep floundering and floundering. Like, ultimately, as I said, I'm not going to say the Democrats will never win another election because that's ridiculous, but the Democrat Party in its current form is not going to survive, right? It is going to have to basically, this generation of leadership is going to have to basically sink this ship, and then, I don't know, maybe 8 years, 12 years from now, you reinvent yourself. As you saw maybe Bill Clinton do in 1992 for the Democrats, or Ronald Reagan do, or Trump do, by the way, in 2016 after, 2008, 2012, the Obama era of Republicans basically getting utterly destroyed. That's what's going to have to happen. But with that said, guys, let me know all of your thoughts on the current state of the Democrat Party again. What do you think of their cash crisis, their internal chaos? I mean, like I said, you're trying to go into the midterms. All you need to do is be united against Trump, It's a midterm year. You don't really have to even present a vision. They can't even do that. Because they can't stop fighting each other. And even the donors don't want to give. It's amazing. With that said, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video. Subscribe if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.